Where was this vision to meet its fulfillment? It was to be in a place which could appropriately be represented by Sodom and Egypt. Sodom represents the depths of moral degradation. Genesis chapter 19 verses 4 through 11, Ezekiel chapter 16 verses 46 through 56, Jude 7. Egypt has stood through the centuries as a symbol of atheism, infidelity, and opposition to God. Exodus chapter 5 verse 2. The country of France rose up in rebellion against God and by law established fornication. The Lord was crucified in the person of his martyred saints. God's people were slain in France in the St. Bartholomew's massacre. One historian gives the following account of the things taking place in France at this time. The National Convention abolished the Gregorian calendar and the names of the months and days, as it had already abolished the Christian era and made the new era date from the 22nd of September, 1792, the birthday of the French Republic. The year was divided into 12 months of 30 days each. The remaining 5 days were called sans culitides and were consecrated to genius, to labor, to actions, etc. Infidelity and atheism reigned supreme. The National Convention abolished the Sabbath, and the leaders of the Paris Commune declared that they intended to dethrone the King of Heaven as well as the monarchs of the earth. Finally, November 10, 1793, the leaders of the Paris Commune, Herbert, Chamet, Marmero, and the Prussian anarchist Cloutz, prevailed upon the National Convention to decree the abolition of the Christian religion in France and the substitution of the worship of reason instead. Marmero's young and beautiful but prostitute wife, who had been a dancer, personated the goddess of reason, and as such, she was enthroned on the high altar of the Cathedral of Notre Dame and worshipped by the members of the National Convention and the Paris Commune. Goebel, the constitutional bishop of Paris, and several other ecclesiastics were compelled publicly to apostatize from Roman Catholic Christianity and to accept the new worship of reason. While the Cathedral of Notre Dame was thus profaned by being converted into a temple of atheism, the other Catholic churches were plundered and subjected to every kind of sacrilege, and the mass vestments and church ornaments and implements were carried through the streets in blasphemous processions. Over all the public cemeteries was placed the inscription, "Death is an eternal sleep." The tombs of the French kings at St. Denis were violated, and the remains of the dead monarchs were cast into a common ditch, so that the people might forget every vestige of royalty. Such were the crowning acts of that reign of terror which cost the lives of more than 1 million Frenchmen. The Standard History of the World by Israel Smith Clare, Volume 7, pages 3386, 3387. Now this beast of the bottomless pit was atheistic France, which did its work during the French Revolution beginning in 1789. The papacy had laid the groundwork for the French Revolution during her years of supremacy when tradition was exalted above God's word. It was popery that had begun the work which atheism was completing. The policy of Rome had wrought out those conditions, social, political, and religious, that were hurrying France on to ruin. Writers, in referring to the horrors of the revolution, say that these excesses are to be charged upon the throne and the church. In strict justice, they are to be charged upon the church. Popery had poisoned the minds of kings against the Reformation, as an enemy to the crown, an element of discord that would be fatal to the peace and harmony of the nation. It was the genius of Rome that by this means inspired the cruelty and the most galling oppression which proceeded from the throne. The spirit of liberty went with the Bible. Wherever the gospel was received, the minds of the people were awakened. They began to cast off the shackles that had held them bond slaves of ignorance, vice, and superstition. They began to think and act as men. Monarchs saw it and trembled for their despotism. Rome was not slow to inflame their jealous fears, said the Pope to the regent of France in 1525. This mania, Protestantism, would not only confound and destroy religion, but all principalities, nobility, laws, orders, and ranks besides. A few years later, a papal nuncio warned the king, "Sire, be not deceived. The Protestants will upset all civil as well as religious order. The throne is in as much danger as the altar. The introduction of a new religion must necessarily introduce a new government." And theologians appealed to the prejudices of the people by declaring that the Protestant doctrine entices men away to novelties and folly. It robs the king of the devoted affection of his subjects and devastates both church and state. Thus Rome succeeded in arraying France against the Reformation. It was to uphold the throne and preserve the nobles and maintain the laws that the sword of persecution was first unsheathed in France. The Triumph of God's Love, pages 163-164. The 3.5 year period was the time when by decree religion was abolished in France. It was on November 26, 1793, at the Council of the Commune at Paris, that all worship, save that of reason, was prohibited. Restrictions were not removed until June 17, 1797. Slaves abolishes the Bible. The papacy had been opposed to making the scriptures available in the lingua franca of the common people for 1260 years of her supremacy. However, this new beast's power is predicted to war against the Bible at the close of the 1260 years. This is done in such a way that the scriptures are personified as being slain for a period of 3.5 prophetic days. Taking the prophetic day to represent 1 year, this means that the scriptures were slain or abolished for 3.5 literal years. Such details as these aid us to pinpoint the power that is indicated in the prediction. In 1793, atheism, calling itself communism, arose mainly in France, and they passed a law outlawing the Bible. The Roman power had kept the Bible from the common people, but now this new power declared that the Bible was to be destroyed forever. It was killed. In other words, it was to have no political influence at all. Not only did France declare herself to be atheistic during the Revolution, she officially abolished all religion. As far as the French were concerned, the Christian religion was the Roman Catholicism which, through the agencies of the priesthood and aristocracy, had sorely oppressed them. Because of the fierce resistance of both the clergy and the royal family to the Protestant faith when it attempted to enter France, the French people failed to distinguish false Christianity from the true faith. Thus, in their blind fury, they turned against their oppressors, attacking everything that was associated with any religion. On November 23, 1793, the convention decreed the abolition of all religion. This included the abolition of the scriptures. On 17 June 1797, just over 3.5 years later, 3 years, 6 months, and 20-odd days, the National Assembly voted that religion be restored and toleration be given to the scriptures, thus fulfilling in remarkable detail this specification of the prophecy. People and kindreds, other nations, these would observe the war on the Bible in France. Their dead bodies 3.5 days. In harmony with the principle of prophetic interpretation, 1 day in Bible prophecy equals 1 year. Thus we have a time period of 3.5 years in which the Bible was to be put to death. The papacy suppressed and obscured the Bible, but France killed it. Many generally understood the beast of verse 7 to represent the First French Republic, 1792 to 1804, especially in terms of its anti-religious bias, and find this prophecy fulfilled during that brief period in French revolutionary history when atheism was at its height. This period may be reckoned from November 10, 1793, when a decree issued in Paris abolished religion, to June 17, 1797, when it is held that the French government removed restrictions against the practice of religion. The world for the first time heard an assembly of men, born and educated in civilization, and assuming the right to govern one of the finest of the European nations, uplift their united voice to deny the most solemn truth which man's soul receives, and renounce unanimously the belief and worship of a deity. Sir Walter Scott, Life of Napoleon, Volume 1, Chapter 17. Bibles were gathered and burned in the streets, and with blasphemous boldness almost beyond belief, one of the priests of the new order said, "God, if you exist, avenge your injured name. I bid you defiance. You remain silent. You dare not launch your thunders. Who after this will believe in your existence?" Lacretelle, History, Volume 2, page 309. And Sir Archibald Allison, History of Europe, Volume 1, Chapter 10. Not suffer their dead bodies to be put in graves. The language of this verse describes the feelings of other nations besides the one committing the outrage on the witnesses. They would see what war infidel France had made on the Bible, but would not be led nationally to engage in the wicked work, nor suffer the murdered witnesses to be buried, or put out of sight among themselves, though they lay dead 3.5 days, that is, 3.5 years, in France. No, this very attempt on the part of France served to arouse Christians everywhere to put forth new exertions in behalf of the Bible, as we shall presently see. Daniel and the Revelation, by Uriah Smith, page 502. They that dwell upon the earth. This refers to the wicked, who walk after the flesh and the sight of their eyes, as opposed to the righteous, who walk after the Spirit and whose citizenship is in heaven. When France publicly rejected God and set aside the Bible, wicked men and spirits of darkness exulted in their attainment of the object so long desired, a kingdom free from the restraints of the law of God. God's faithful witnesses, slain by the blasphemous power that ascended out of the bottomless pit, were not long to remain silent. After 3.5 days, the Spirit of life from God entered into them, and they stood upon their feet, and great fear fell upon them which saw them. Revelation chapter 11, verse 11. It was in 1793 that the decrees which abolished the Christian religion and set aside the Bible passed the French Assembly. 3.5 years later, a resolution rescinding these decrees, thus granting toleration to the scriptures, was adopted by the same body. The Triumph of God's Love, page 169. The other nations saw the terrible events that happened when France, by a decree of her government, passed a law doing away with the Bible and all religion and belief in God. For exactly 3.5 years, as the prophecy says, this went on. Wicked people celebrated, but soon terror took the place of merrymaking. No one knew when his head would be the next to come off. Exactly 3.5 years later, that same government passed a law putting the Bible and belief in God back in their rightful place. All thinking people who saw the events that had happened were made fearful of ever doing such a wicked thing again. After this time, the Bible was held in greater reverence, at least by the Protestant nations, than ever before. Great fear fell. A guilty conscience, which had tormented the wicked during the time of the prophecy of the two witnesses, once more asserts itself. Those who had rejoiced over the death of the witnesses now stand aghast as they behold the miracle of the resurrection of these witnesses. Men may connive to wipe out God, religion, and the Bible, but this is not possible. Isaiah says, "No weapon that is formed against thee shall prosper, and every tongue that shall rise against thee in judgment thou shalt condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their righteousness is of me, saith the Lord." Isaiah chapter 54, verse 17. What Isaiah says is correct because God has spoken once. Twice have I heard this, that power belongeth unto God. The 62nd Psalm, verse 11. And they heard a great voice from heaven saying unto them, Come up hither. And they ascended up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies beheld them. And the same hour was there a great earthquake, and the 10th part of the city fell. And in the earthquake were slain of men 7,000, and the remnant were affrighted, and gave glory to the God of heaven. Verses 12 and 13. Voice from heaven. The speaker is not identified, but presumably he is God. Come up hither. Not only are the witnesses resurrected by God, they are bidden to enter heaven. Thus while their enemies behold them, they are completely vindicated from the outrages they had suffered. And the truth of the prophecy they have faithfully proclaimed for 1260 days is demonstrated to all. The voice of God himself has welcomed them to heaven, before the very eyes of those who had sought to destroy them. As previously explained, 3.5 years after the scripture were abolished by the French government, they were restored again by law. The scriptures are personified as being resurrected and ascending to heaven in full view of those who abolished them. The phrase ascended to heaven is used in scripture to denote great exaltation. Your greatness has grown and reaches to the heavens. Daniel chapter 4 verse 22. This text referred to the power and prestige of the king of Babylon. In Revelation 11, the expression describes how the scriptures, as a result of the attack on them by revolutionary France, will gain universal recognition and popularity. This was strikingly fulfilled in the formation of the great Bible societies, the British and Foreign Bible Society in 1804 and the American Bible Society in 1816. These societies, along with their auxiliaries, have scattered the scriptures all over the earth. For many years, the Bible had been printed and circulated in less than 50 languages. Since then, it has been distributed widely in hundreds of languages. It is the most purchased and read book ever. So this exaltation of the witnesses has been understood as symbolizing the remarkable popularity that the scriptures have enjoyed since the early 19th century. Soon after the French Revolution, various national Bible societies were established. These societies have circulated scripture portions in more than 1,500 languages. Thus, in the last century and a half, the Bible, rather than being relegated to oblivion as a spiritual guide, has come to enjoy its widest circulation. Since that period, the Bible has been scattered in the hundreds of millions worldwide. Yes, the scriptures may truly be said to be exalted to heaven in a cloud being an emblem of heavenly elevation. After the revolution, the Bible not only rose to its feet, but it arose to new heights of worldwide distribution. Revelation's two witnesses have indeed ascended up to heaven. At the same time, there blossomed the great era of foreign missions, wherein the scriptures were taken to the remotest areas of the world. Moreover, the extraordinary circulation of the scriptures began during the French Revolution. Never should it be forgotten that both missionary and Bible societies had their birth at this very time. Here is a prediction that Christ's two witnesses would again gain favor. How is this fulfilled? Bible societies were organized. Their objective was to make the Bible available to people everywhere in their own languages. The Bible since then has been translated and printed in more than 1,000 languages and dialects. There is also here in verse 13 the prediction that in one of the 10 kingdoms into which Western Rome had been divided, there would be great trouble represented by the earthquake. In the same hour there was a great earthquake. Verse 13. At the time, the only Western European kingdom that possessed the 5 characteristics listed above was revolutionary France. In 1789, the French people arose in awful revenge against the arrogant, corrupt, cruel, and selfish aristocracy and the priesthood that had ground them down in poverty and serfdom them for so many years. It was a political earthquake that shocked the civilized world. Historians and statesmen have described it as such. The time of the 18th century French Revolution, when the 1260 years of the papal era were closing, was a turning point in the history of the modern world. It brought forth forces that made a permanent change in the thoughts and actions of mankind. The French Revolution was one of the momentous events in the history not only of France, but of Europe and even the whole world. It threatened a general earthquake in the political world. The minds of men were shaken as by the yawning of the ground during the fury of an earthquake. It destroyed the landmarks of the world in which many generations of men had passed their lives. The wealthy oppressed the poor and the poor hated the rich. The courts of justice were corrupt and the middle to lower classes were heavily taxed to support a system of corruption on the part of the government and the clergy, which the both were flourishing in their wealth. But what Rome had purposed, holding the masses in a blind submission to her dogmas, only served for creating a mass of infidels and revolutionists. Romanism was despised as priestcraft and the clergy as a party to their oppression. As masses lived in hunger, priests and rulers basked in wealth and opulence. The outworking of all the above was the revolution. Notice the following. At the opening of the revolution, by a concession of the king, the people were granted a representation exceeding that of the nobles and the clergy combined. Thus the balance of power was in their hands, but they were not prepared to use it with wisdom and moderation. Eager to redress the wrongs they had suffered, they determined to undertake the reconstruction of society. An outraged populace, whose minds were filled with bitter and long-treasured memories of wrong, resolved to revolutionize the state of misery that had grown unbearable and to avenge themselves upon those whom they regarded as the authors of their sufferings. The oppressed wrought out the lesson they had learned under tyranny and became the oppressors of those who had oppressed them. The example of persecution which the clergy of France had exhibited for so many ages was now retorted upon them with signal vigor. The scaffolds ran red with the blood of the priests. The galleys and the prisons, once crowded with Huguenots, were now filled with their persecutors. Chained to the bench and toiling at the oar, the Roman Catholic clergy experienced all those woes which their church had so freely inflicted on the gentle heretics. The shootings, the drownings, the roastings of the Roman Catholic loyalists, both priests and nobles, had all their prototypes or models in the barbarities of another age practiced under the direction of the Pope and French papists. E.B. Eliot, Horae Apocalypticae, Volume 3, page 321-322. The French Revolution and the ensuing reign of terror slew as many priests and papists under Louis XVI as the priests and papists slew Protestants under Louis XIV. The French Revolution was one of the momentous events in the history not only of France, but of Europe and even the whole world. L. E. Froome, Prophetic Faith of Our Fathers, Volume 2, page 633. 10th part. This is not the final earthquake, for only a fraction of the city, see notes on verses 2 and 8, falls at this time. Confer Revelation 16, verse 18. This earthquake signifies a temporary judgment that frightens into submission some of those who have glory in the death of the witnesses. Some applied the expression 10th part of the city to the entire nation of France on the basis that France was one of the 10 kings to rise from the fallen Roman Empire. Daniel chapter 7, verse 24. Others identify the city as Papal Rome and France as one of its 10 divisions. The 10th part of the city fell. A 10th part of Babylon the Great, the Papal Roman power, fell. France is one of the 10 horns that arose out of the divided Western Roman Empire and gave its allegiance to the papal power. Now she falls in a political and religious upheaval. There seems to be the suggestion that those who had opposed God's 2 witnesses would finally come to the place where God would be recognized. The slaying of 7,000 may have reference to the getting rid of the nobility during the French Revolution. Slain of men 7,000. Greek, onomata, anthropon. Literally, names of men. Some take the word onomata, names, here in the sense of persons. See Acts chapter 3, verse 16. Others apply onomata to titles, offices, or orders that were suppressed during the French Revolution. Because of this great upheaval, it is said that there were 7,000 men slain, or names of men. 7 is a symbol of completeness. Thus there is a complete slaying of the names of men, undoubtedly the titles of men. Aristocratic titles abolished. In the same hour, 7,000 men were killed. Verse 13. The margin reads names of men. Undoubtedly, this term refers to the titles which were associated with the aristocracy. Did the French Revolution abolish the titles which had been a divisive feature of French society? Note the decree of June 19, 1790. Hereditary nobility is forever abolished. In consequence, the titles of prince, duke, count, marquis, viscount, vidame, baron, knight, massive, ecular, noble, and all other similar titles shall neither be taken by anyone, whomsoever, nor given to anybody. Altogether, there are at least 12 specifications in this striking prediction of Revelation chapter 11. Every one of them was clearly and accurately fulfilled in revolutionary France. No other power has ever met these specifications. No other interpretation of this chapter provides a satisfactory or meaningful understanding of Revelation 11. And the remnant were affrighted and gave glory to the God of heaven. Their God dishonoring and heaven-defying work filled France with such scenes of blood, carnage, and horror as made even the infidels themselves tremble and stand aghast. And the remnant that escaped the horrors of that hour gave glory to God, not willingly, but the God of heaven caused this wrath of man to praise him, by causing all the world to see that those who make war on heaven make graves for themselves. Thus glory redounded to God by the very means that the wicked men employed to tarnish that glory. Daniel and the Revelation by Uriah Smith, page 504-505. In summary, the world in these latter days is again setting itself against God, against the testimony of the two witnesses, and going into idolatry. The inspired forecast of our time is, this know also, that in the last days perilous times shall come. For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. From such turn away. 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1-5. The characteristics mentioned here are not compatible with genuine Bible Christianity. In the battle which Satan continues to fight against Christ, he is seeking to destroy God's law. If he could successfully do this, then anything goes. He tries to urge people to do their own thing. This is the way of death. Proverbs chapter 14, verse 12, 16, verse 25. Be not deceived, God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. Galatians chapter 6, verse 7. Unhappy France reaped in blood the harvest she had sown. Terrible were the results of her submission to the controlling power of Rome. Where France, under the influence of Romanism, had set up the first stake at the opening of the Reformation, there the Revolution set up its first guillotine. On the very spot where the first martyrs to the Protestant faith were burned in the 16th century, the first victims were guillotined in the 18th. In repelling the gospel, which would have brought her healing, France had opened the door to infidelity and ruin. When the restraints of God's law were cast aside, it was found that the laws of man were inadequate to hold in check the powerful tides of human passion, and the nation swept on to revolt and anarchy. The triumph of God's love, page 166. When error in one garb has been detected, Satan only masks it in a different disguise, and multitudes receive it as eagerly as at the first. When the people found Romanism to be a deception, and he could not through this agency lead them to transgression of God's law, he urged them to regard all religion as a cheat, and the Bible as a fable, and casting aside the divine statutes, they gave themselves up to unbridled iniquity. The fatal error which wrought such woe for the inhabitants of France was the ignoring of this one great truth, that true freedom lies within the prescriptions of the law of God. O that thou hadst hearkened to my commandments, then had thy peace been as a river, and thy righteousness as the waves of the sea. There is no peace, saith the Lord, unto the wicked, but whoso hearkeneth unto me shall dwell safely, and shall be quiet from fear of evil. Isaiah chapter 48, verse 18 and 22, Proverbs chapter 1, verse 33. Atheists, infidels, and apostates oppose and denounce God's law, but the results of their influence prove that the well-being of man is bound up with his obedience of the divine statutes. Albeit pages 168 and 169. Among the many blessings which attend those who are willing for their lives to be in harmony with the principle of God's righteous law is this: moreover, by them is thy servant warned, and in keeping of them there is great reward. The 19th Psalm, verse 11.